All right, so brush, medium, just a little bit to loosen it up before I start to paint. Now I'm going to grab some paint. Oh man. Ooh, excuse me. Here we go. It's like I got a dry spot when I breathed in. Made me cough. So I'm going to try to redraw what I have and make it a little more accurate. And now I can just start putting stuff in or wiping stuff away based on where it is. So let's start with the apple again. My apple is a little bit too tall and round. It needs to be a little bit squattier as I go through and do that. So I'm going to maybe start here. This is that top edge. And I'm coming over and out. It's rounding over. The widest spot for me in my view on the right side is up high. And then from there, everything curves down and under. From that point down, it's moving over. And on the left side, it's a little bit lower than that. So if I were to think about that, down here is maybe where that point is on that side. And then from here, sweeping down and under, something like that. So it feels a little more squatty. I also want to kind of show where I had the highlight here, but the highlight's actually down and over here. This is where the stem is, now that I'm looking at it a little bit closer. Okay, so that's more like what it should look like. I can also say, oh, well, this isn't looking so good. I can pull a little more paint away. I can redraw it. So I'm still using kind of that side of the brush to draw. If I want to put down a darker stroke, I might move it to the wider part, but for the most part, I have the thin part of the brush. I'm going to redraw that shadow shape. It's kind of coming down and over this way, and it's sweeping over this way, and then it's over and around, and it sits down low on this other side. And I might add a few strokes in here to show that this is the core shadow. This is where it's a little bit dark. And as I add more paint and less medium, this is going to get thicker and it's going to stay more. It's going to want to blend more and flow less. So I have to kind of be aware of when I want it to flow more and when I want it to flow less. Still feels, I think because I'm sitting a little bit to the side, it feels a little crooked. I know I'm going to change that again later, but that's closer to what I see. There's a shadow underneath. It comes down a little bit lower than I had it. It's really dark under here, but as it moves out, it gets very light. So I might use this brush, and I'm just going to start pulling my brush through there and wiping off that paint onto my rag, because it's just extra paint that I don't need. I don't need that much of that kind of super flowy dark. So that's better for me than what I had seen. One other thing, I'm going to maybe try to put that highlight in or show myself where it is, and it's over here. So here's my eraser, kind of drawing in that highlight. I can kind of wipe it off and get a cleaner mark there. But it's down on the shoulder of the apple more than it is next to that little part that swoops down to the stem. All right, so I've addressed some of that. This angle of this light in between the two is not correct. I'm going to just kind of soften that. This is not part of the shadow. This is part of the light. So I'm going to just blend that in for now. This comes over. That's probably good. This needs to be down a lot closer to it so that this moves closer and farther down. And you can see that because I have so much medium in this paint right now, you can see all those brush strokes. You can see those horizontal strokes that I'm making. And not all of those are good for now. I want to maybe slowly add more paint in so I have more control as I go through. Excuse me. All right, so if I'm looking at the apple, the edge of the base over here that's behind the apple, and it kind of comes, it's about maybe something like that. I'm going to grab a little more paint, a little less. There we go. And then from there, it curves back and over, something like that. Maybe it goes up a little bit, then it curves over to there. And then we have the vertical part of the neck somewhere in there before catching the chin here and moving out. I'm going to measure that angle, something like this. So I'm close. It's not perfect, but we will work our way to that, getting a better edge. This division line between the blue and the yellow actually happens down here. So I got to pull that down so it's lower. Measure that angle. Oh, that's about right. When in doubt, if you're doing an angle where a wall meets like a base or a floor, and you're looking down and into it, it's going to usually be pretty horizontal. The tendency is to make it a little bit more diagonal, and that's not good. Can kind of make the space that something's sitting in look strange. So I would recommend paying attention to it and trying to do a job where it sits more horizontal. Even if that's not what exactly you see, make it more horizontal anyway. So the chin's coming over. I'm seeing a little bit of that, a little bit here, and we can kind of fill in some of that shadow. The other shadow comes over and it drops down maybe about here, and it's sweeping around the curve of the neck. The far side of the neck, I'm seeing is somewhere in there. And then that comes over and down behind the can. So I might pull that can over this way just a little bit as I go through. And then the muscle of the neck coming down and going towards this space right here. And so there's a little bit of a shadow on that. And this is there. There's a hollow between the two parts of the neck in here. If I clean off my brush a little bit, I can blend this in so that's not quite so dark. There we go. And this is the whole time that I'm working and redrawing, this is getting drier and drier and drier. So that's a good thing for me, because when it dries, it's not going to flow as much, and then I can kind of control it a little bit more. I'm going to redraw this. I want this to go that, then it goes up, and then it curves over and down, something like that. One thing I want to do for sure that's bothering me is, you know, the can, as I've kind of wiped it away, to me looks very much like it's facing straight at me. I don't see the top, but even you can see the top. I can see the top quite a bit. So that ellipse of creating the top edge of this is something I want to include. So there's my first guess at it, something like that. Move this edge over just a little bit. And then the bottom edge is also curving, something like that, so that I have some information there. There's the circle part of the label up here. There's the white stripe that has the writing. It comes probably almost to the edge here. It kind of swoops and has a diagonal. Something like that. And there's the little rim at the bottom. A lot of the darker values are underneath the edge right up here at the top. And these are some of the darkest ones in the whole picture. So I'm going kind of heavier with a little bit more paint. And a lot of this is just about adjusting. If this works, good, leave it alone. If it doesn't, does it need more light or does it need more shadow? Am I pulling paint away or am I pushing more paint into it? There's like a dark that goes behind that white label that's reflecting the shadow, maybe of the light pole that's over here. And it catches down here below the label on that side. Man, I said, oh, I don't need to bring a water today. I don't need to bring a water down here. I was wrong. Another thing that you can use to wipe away, which I don't have right here, but I think I might go grab because I know where they are, is a Q-tip. Q-tips are great for this too. They do sell a kind of brush tool-ish thing for this, which is called a color shaper. It's like a rubber tipped kind of brush with like a rubber tip at the end, and it just allows you to kind of push the paint around. But I know I have one somewhere, but I never use it, so I did not go to try and find it. So something that I'm feeling I need to do is pull up a little bit of paint, try and get a clean edge of this, maybe turn that inside out so I'm not getting too much paint on here. That back edge of the cast, I'm gonna lighten this up just a bit. I've got a hair on here I can see. Let's see if I can pick it off. Nope. It's stuck. I will have to use my brush to get it. All right. Here we go. I got it. Random hairs in a painting. If you ever have a painting where you have a hair or a bristle from your brush and it dries inside the painting, there is a way to pull those out, and it's usually with, if you can get a piece of silk material and you just rub that on in a really kind of like circular soft way, it usually pulls that hair up off and out of the paint. You might have to retouch that spot, but you can get the hair out. This shadow goes like that, so that this is all dark in here. So that's the difference between when I wiped out, I just took out too much. And so now I'm adding some of that dark back. The other thing to think about as we kind of slowly build this up and kind of get it going, if you over wipe and you leave it too light, that's usually not a problem, because adding some brown paint back into this when it's dry is very easy to do. It's harder to pull it away. I mean, after it dries, you don't pull anything more away. If you don't pull it away on day one, that's it. That's all you've got. So it's better to try to pull away stuff now, today, before it's too late. The lips and their angle is slightly going down. So if I'm here for some of the shadow underneath the lip, somewhere in here, that comes up to upper lip. I'm making a guess. I'm going to soften this and probably change it. I'll probably feel like it's wrong later. But for now, that's where I'm going to put it. So the shadow coming off of the nose and the wing of the nose actually needs to be over a little bit more. Keep it just soft and loose. That bottom of the nose coming up, I see it somewhere in here. It needs to be fairly close to the edge of the cheek. The distance between the tip of the nose and the cheek is not very much. So that's what I'm doing. I'm kind of looking to try and measure that a little bit before I plop that in. The shadow side of the nose moves down, slants towards that other edge. And that moves up. I can always wipe away more. It's still wet. So this is a process where painting like this is good for oil painting, because you have more control, because you can do different things to it. I don't have to get it 100% correct on the first try, as opposed to an acrylic or something like that. If I don't get this correct, then I have to go back into it and repaint on top. Here, I can kind of make a guess. Maybe that's okay. I'm starting to like the mouth less and less. I'm going to soften it up, and then I can go back and redraw it. And it's still wet. I didn't really lose any time. I just kind of quickly smudge it and move to the next stage. Let it dry a little bit, then come back and fix it. Hair's all down in here around the ear. So I'm pretty happy with the size of these. This is kind of a block-in stage. So I have, you know, the placement of a lot of things. I have some of the values started, and I can really start to kind of decide what I want to keep and what I want to get rid of or change. I think the eyes are going to end up being right up at the very top. And they're not open, they're just kind of looking down. So this is a trick. I might have to pull this up a little bit. Slide it over. There we go. So that shows me these two spots that I couldn't wipe away with. Get those really quick. And now I can try to so I would recommend anything. I think I just wiped paint all over myself. Have an extra rag to wipe your hands just for that. It's going to be helpful, especially if you want to have. I would never paint in clothes that you think are really nice that you don't want to get dirty. If we were going into the classroom, I would say the same thing. I would say make sure to wear your not nice clothes to class. I want to move this back a little bit. I feel like that would make it a little more graceful. Coming down the cheek here towards the corner of the mouth. And most of this side, I'll hold this, it wants to shake when I put pressure on it. This is over here in the shadow, so that's why I'm kind of adding some paint and blending it in across that shadow side of the face towards the jawline over here. Soften a little bit of that. So we're just building it up. Keep that edge soft. This red over here is middle value. It's not light, but it's not as dark as the other. Yeah. That'll be a nice pop of color and light back in there that shows up. This edge is drying, and a lot of this, because I had so much medium in it, you can see this edge along here and is kind of drippy and extra dark. That is a good indication that you had a little more medium than you needed inside of something. So that's something you would want to play with and kind of soften before the day is over. I want to take this farther than this, but this is a good stage. This is kind of, you know, this is where I would start to really start to think about where do I wipe away, where do I put some extra, and start to really lock down my tones on my values on this. So when I do this, what I'm doing is I'm just kind of slightly pulling my brush very lightly across the surface. And by doing that, I'm hoping to pull just a little bit of paint around and thin it out and keep it a little bit middle value. I'm not trying to go completely white. I'm not trying to go too dark. Trying to go somewhere in between. If I go slower and I put a little more pressure, I put a little more paint down. If I have that light touch and I go faster and I kind of push stuff around, it makes